Today's story is called PC 104, and I wrote it, so I hope you'll enjoy. PC 104 Arrival. He hit hard. His chest smacked the hot metal grating, driving all of the breath from his lungs. The downwash from the engines whipped dust, rock, and debris all around him, cutting his skin and stinging his eyes. Rough hands grabbed him and dragged him off the grating and out of the way of the next deposit. Another thump sounded behind him, dim in the cacophony of engine noise and tumult of air. He watched the gravel pass below him as he was dragged about 100 yards away and dumped against a wall. The bonds of his wrists were cut. He rolled into a sitting position. "Just breathe, Preston," he gasped, attempting to draw in as much air into his lungs as possible. "Breathe." His lungs burned. The air tasted acrid. Some from the engine exhaust, but not as much as back home. He gagged as he attempted to breathe again. The air tasted unclean and left a residue in his mouth and throat that made swallowing difficult. He dry heaved several times, nothing left in his stomach. The burn in his lungs persisted. He opened and closed his mouth, attempting to generate some kind of liquid to dispel the burning sensation. Preston looked at his hands. The brown skin was cracked and dried. His muscles ached as the pull of gravity reasserted itself on its frame. He wiped as much of the grime and dirt off of his face as possible. His vision cleared a little as the engine whine from overhead increased in volume and was suddenly pitched higher. He looked up to see four large engines flare briefly as the Atmos drive kicked in and pushed the large vessel quickly back out of the atmosphere. The sound died away slowly. Preston leaned his head back against the wall. He was one of 21 people, men and women, dumped in a line, dust blown and gagging. A man with a low-brimmed hat, shaded goggles, and a gray, dusty bandana tied tightly across his mouth approached the line. He grabbed the first person in line and hauled them to their feet, a slightly built woman. Once she was standing, she cleared her throat and tried to speak. The man backhanded her across the mouth. "No talking," the inspector growled. He yanked her hair back, exposing a large purple cross-shaped welt on the side of her neck. "Theft!" he shouted. He released her hair and shoved her toward a door. She trudged away, leaning heavily against the wall. The next man in line was treated in a similar manner. He had a large M with 3 hash marks branded on his forehead. "Multiple murderer!" the inspector shouted. Time and again, a new arrival was hauled up and their marked crime was announced. Finally, the inspector hefted Preston to his feet. The inspector grabbed Preston's hair and pulled his head back, down, and side to side. Apparently displeased, he pulled his goggles down and glared at Preston's face. "Plain face!" the inspector cried. He stepped back and then drove both fists into the pit of Preston's stomach. Preston doubled over in pain, collapsing to his knees. The inspector pulled out a large pistol from his belt and crashed the butt of the weapon across Preston's head. The sunlight flared, then separated into flashing stars, supernovas, and galaxies swirling around a spreading black hole which pulled all the light into it and enveloped Preston. As consciousness slipped away, a graveled voice growled, "Welcome to PC 104. Consciousness returned slowly. He first grew aware of pain, deep throbbing that matched the beat of his heart. Pain flashed through his body, eliciting a groan to escape his lips. Something cool and damp dabbed his forehead. "Gently now, gently." A deep, soothing voice spoke softly next to his ear. "Don't fight it. Pain means you're still living." Preston's body stiffened. "Who's there?" he mumbled. His voice felt ragged in his throat. "No one of note," the deep voice returned with a chuckle. The soft laugh sounded more like a low rumble of a distant thunderstorm. "Why are you helping me?" Preston focused on speaking as clearly as possible, forming each word carefully. "Well, someone should. Don't worry. They know I'm helping. They don't care much at this point." The low thunder laugh rumbled again. "Why?" Preston attempted to open one eye. "We had ourselves a little discussion. They said that you should be put out of your misery. I didn't quite agree. It's as simple as that." "Who are you?" Preston finally forced one eye open. All was blurry and dim. Preston blinked again, but only one eye would open. A friend, that's all. The damp coolness continued to lave Preston's forehead. Somewhere above him was shadow and an occasional flash of reflected light. Thank you. Preston gasped as another round of pain eddied through his body. The laving stopped briefly. Preston heard the slosh of water and the tinkle of water falling. The coolness returned. Don't thank me yet. You still got to get out of here. Where am I? Still in the receiving plant? Preston pressed his eye open and attempted to turn to the speaker. No, you're in the off-home city now. Well, if you can call it a city. You being a plain face is going to make it tough. But you still got a chance. Preston thought for a moment. A plain face? That's a new one for me. Never heard of it before. Whatever I didn't think it was all that criminal because they didn't mark me. I know. I've known some plain faces in my life. Good folks mostly. Stuck here because of the crazy back home. You see life differently. You talk about it differently. Different is bad. You're stuck here now, too. The plain face is what marks you here. In this world, a marked face is more of a badge of honor. Plain faces is the bad guys. Better make the most of it. The low voice was soft and strong. Preston's eye finally focused on the face above him. It was a large face, dark-skinned, with large brown eyes. All his features seemed large, including the brands and tattoos that covered his face. Preston could not see the detail in the dim light, but they were there. A small disk hung around the man's neck and caught and reflected the little bit of light in the room. Preston reached up to touch the disk without even a thought. What is that? Nothing of note now. Don't worry about it. I'll tell you later. Preston lay back, blinking to try and bring some focus to his vision. Soon he slipped back into sleep. Real sleep. Not the unconscious mimicry of death, but real sleep. He dreamt. He remembered. He wept. Preston awoke slowly this time. The air was hotter, closer, and it stank. The bitter taste on his tongue was still there, but not as prevalent. He was thirsty. He opened his eyes, and this time they both opened. The room was brighter, a good bit more. Slowly, Preston eased himself into a sitting position. He felt the room sway, plunge, and then return to balance. Blinking slowly to allow his equilibrium to find center, Preston gingerly put his hand to his head and began to survey the damage done. A large knot protruded from the side of his skull from which the ache throbbing flowed. The pain gave him a focus point. He closed his eyes and centered his mind on the pain. His mouth formed silent words. He focused the words toward the pain, lashing the pain with the words which were commanding, demanding, and dominating. Preston felt the pain lessen. I heard tell of this, but I never thought to see it. Preston opened his eyes slowly and saw the immense hulk standing over him. The man's low voice was filled with awe. How do you do it? Preston smiled. I asked. I was answered, and the injury obeyed. That's not something you see every day. The comment was almost a whisper. The man reached out a hand tentatively to touch Preston's head, stopped himself, and then offered a hand to Preston. Name's Duncan. Preston took Duncan's hand firmly and shook it. Hello, Duncan. Thank you for your kindness. Duncan brushed off the comment as if it were a fly. Just one man looking out for another one. Duncan settled himself on a large stool next to the bed. He gingerly touched Preston's head, turning it this way and that, gently prodding the flesh. Preston felt no pain. Duncan whistled lowly. Are you strong enough to stand? Preston nodded. I think so. We won't know until we try. Duncan gripped Preston's arm as the two worked together. Preston leaned on the giant and found his legs wobbled slightly. Seems like I'm still pretty weak. The low thunder laugh sounded again. Gravity's stronger here than back home. You'll build the muscle, or die trying. That's a comforting thought, Preston said wryly. Well, that's one way to know you still got living to do. Adapt and grow, son. Duncan released Preston's arm. Preston stood splay-legged with his arms out to steady himself. He slowly straightened, drawing his feet together. He reached his hand above his head and pushed upwards towards the ceiling. He moved through a series of slow stretches. Once it was apparent that he would not collapse immediately, Duncan left the room and returned with a steaming bowl. Well, that smells great. Preston breathed in more deeply and coughed lightly. His stomach rumbled rudely in response. You're just hungry, Duncan chuckled. It's good for you. Don't ask what's in it, just enjoy it. Preston sat back down on the bed, dripping with sweat from his brief exertion. The stew was lumpy with meat and vegetables of some description, with a large hunk of brown bread protruding from the middle of the stew. He accepted the food gratefully. Preston bowed his head and murmured a few words. Duncan watched him carefully. Once the words were done, Preston looked up at the large man. Thank you for your kindness and your hospitality. I appreciate it more than I can say. I don't know that I can ever repay you. Duncan waved the comment aside with large, rough hands. No need to thank me. I'm just doing a kindness. Don't need to be repaid. I do what I do because I choose to do it. Preston ate slowly with great relish. Why do you choose to do it? It seems that it would be simpler to let a plain face die in the street rather than help him. Simpler for you and less dangerous. His dinner companion shrugged. It may seem simpler, but it ain't. I got my own debt to pay. I choose to pay it in this way. I was helped once myself. Didn't deserve it. I can't repay it, but I can be thankful for it. I show this by helping those who can't help themselves. Duncan lifted the small disc that hung around his neck. It gleamed and sent dancing lights bouncing across all corners of the small room. It was a plain disc of silver-colored metal. It was unadorned. Duncan fingered it, gently rubbing his fingers along the edge. He slipped it from around his neck and held it out to Preston. For the first time in their brief acquaintance, Duncan looked grave. He watched Preston take the disc and examine it closely. Silence hung in the room like heavy incense. The large man sighed and smiled sadly. I am no plain face, but one saved my life. The lady took pity on me and helped me when I was sick. She didn't have to, she just did. No one else would. She told me stories about back home. She told me her story. She didn't have to ask mine. Everyone knows mine. He wiped his large hand across his face as if he were trying to erase the marks of his crimes. Mine are never far away. She told me about why the plain faces are so hated and kicked out of the homeworld. She told me that no matter what was on my face, I didn't have to live with the stain of those crimes inside if I didn't want to. Preston wiped away a tear from his face and watched Duncan closely. Did you meet him? Preston asked in almost a whisper. Duncan's head lifted. An immense smile spread across his face as tears began to pour from his eyes. Yeah, I did. Then you're more than my rescuer, you're my brother. The two men stood and embraced, brothers newly met, brothers in hiding, brothers weeping in shared joy and peace, brothers celebrating unity and comradeship. No thank you needed, no words exchanged. Duncan slipped the small disc around Preston's neck. Now others will know. Not everyone, just the ones who are looking for the plain disc. You're one of us. We're all plain faces in our hearts. Preston left at dusk the following evening. His head still hurt from time to time, but he needed to keep moving. Plain faces were hunted in Off Home City. Duncan helped him prepare. They shared more conversations and tears, more celebrations and laughter. Duncan advised him to go east to the mountains. There was a gathering place for plain faces, hidden from view, a place called the Refuge. As he walked out from the shadow of the buildings, Preston turned to see the large form of Duncan standing under the eaves of a house, his large hand lifted in farewell. Preston returned the gesture. He shook his head. Not farewell. Till we meet again. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful day.